Tonight, the government announces a support package for pubs, but can it really stave off last orders for the Great British Boozer? After another U-turn, pubs and music venues will get 15% off their business rates from April as part of a major support package, the government says. Despite that help, many pubs still face spiralling costs. And what about other parts of the struggling hospitality sector? I'll be speaking to the chef and pub owner Tom Kerridge. Is this just, though, a short-term fix from the Chancellor? I'll speak to the Treasury Minister Dan Tomlinson, and I'll also ask the Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride about his plan to abolish business rates altogether for pubs. Also tonight, as the battle lines are drawn in Greater Manchester for the Gorton and Denton by-election, recriminations continue inside Labour about Andy Burnham's blocked bid to stand. And a political maverick, Sir Keir Starmer, enters the danger zone by teasing the French president's aviator shades and calling him Goose. Was his response surprising? For sure. All that and more with these two top guns, Max Wilson and Salma Shah. They'll be with me for the next hour. It is Tuesday. I'm Matt Barbet, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Good evening, great to have your company. Now, it really is hard to think of an institution that is more totemic to the fabric of our society than the Great British Pub. But it's not in a good way, with more than 15,000 going to the wall in the past 25 years. The pandemic, of course, accelerated the trend, but in recent months, the industry's faced a new crisis as COVID-era support has been removed. The government had resisted bailing out pubs or the wider hospitality sector, but today that changed after another U-turn, with pubs and music venues in England handed millions of pounds after they warned of an imminent financial collapse. From April, they'll get 15% off their new business rates bill, with bills to then be frozen in real terms for a further 2 years. Other businesses, though, like cafes and hotels, aren't included in that support package. Our business correspondent Paul Kelso has been to the pub in South London.
Publican here, pretty pleased with this news, perhaps not least because the Chancellor herself was here talking up what is undeniably a rewriting of the budget, another U-turn. I'll leave it to others to add up how many of those there have been. I can tell you about what the impact on rates has been. The Chancellor made a big deal in her budget that she was cutting business rates. She said that would benefit businesses of all kind, benefit the hospitality sector in particular, because she was cutting rates most of all for pubs, hotels and restaurants. Unfortunately, while the rate was going down, the bills pubs were paying and other business was going up. That's because there's a few things that go into rates. The value on which those rates are based. All pubs, all businesses in the country have been revalued for the first time in 3 years. Pubs, on average, their valuations are up 30%, so you might be paying less tax, but you're paying on a higher number, so it goes up. There's also 40% rates relief that was a COVID-era measure. That was being withdrawn. So pubs, when they did the sums, looked at this, and while there was some more relief coming from the government, they said, we are being hammered here. There has been a pretty effective campaign. Labour MPs, including the Chancellor, have been barred from their locals. So today, a climb down. There's a 15% relief, 15% cut to this year's bill, which will then be frozen for 2 years, not just for pubs, but for music venues. And the Chancellor, when I spoke to her, defended the decision to change policy and set out why she'd done it. Let's hear from her.
We had to increase taxes at the budget to be able to afford the public services in a world that has changed, where there are more threats, there is more pressure on defence budgets. There is an increasing need to build our security and resilience at home, whilst at the same time turbulence that is causing uncertainty around trade. So we did have to raise money. We listen, though, when people raise concerns, and we look at the detail of that and try to make sure we get it right.
Many pubs are going to be better off, or at least no worse off, as a result of this change. There's a signal here that there might be some relief coming for the hotel trade, which is still facing steep increases. We wait and see if this is the last rewriting of that budget.
It's Paul in a rather quiet boozer. Let's go to a much busier one now, because I'm joined by Michelin star chef and pub owner Tom Kerridge. Looks like business is thriving behind you there tonight, Tom. But what do you make of this U-turn by the government?
Well, I mean, it's incredibly unfortunate they had to do it in the first place. I think conversation with industry and industry leaders with an understanding of where they should have been in the first place. I think for the budget, the hospitality sector was looking for help in the first place, some form of structured support. But when those business rates came in and came through, it was a bit of a crushing blow. I think the continued loud voices coming from the hospitality sector, we're in a pub, coming from the pub sector, driving it forward and trying to get into government to be recognised through, whether it's through business or whether it's through the Treasury, to explain what was going on. Whilst we welcome the conversation and the fact that the government have paid some form of attention and listened and has done a U-turn for pubs, there is still a business rates increase. We were looking for something that helps the industry. There's still an increase, although nowhere near as big as it was going to be. But the hospitality sector is a bigger picture, is the one that's suffering. And we talk about this pub is relatively busy this evening, but it is people that are eating and drinking. It operates very similar to a restaurant. Restaurants have the same cost issues that are coming in, from rising national insurance, from minimum wage, from utility bills, from food inflation. All of those sort of things affect the hospitality industry across the board, so it's not just pubs. So there will be calls across the industry for much, much more support coming from government.
And let's be honest, ultimately, people who run pubs like you, restaurants, they're going to pass it on to the consumers. And look, I'm not going to patronise people by saying what it's like. We've all been out probably recently, bought a pint, had fish and chips at the pub or whatever it happens to be, and notice it's a lot more expensive than it used to be. Have you had to put prices up?
We are in a position where prices can't really go any further. We have a space, although maybe the public's quite busy behind me, there is a hall downstairs where nobody is sat in. We are at a point where those ongoing costs and those ongoing prices, that you cannot keep putting them onto the consumer. The consumer is being hit in their pocket as well. So there is a point where pubs and restaurants are having to absorb that. And it's what that lends to then is a kind of a de-skilling process. You end up, what can you buy in? Where can you go? What can you do? What are the cheaper products? How do you still operate? Where can you find tiny little margins? And the sad thing about that is it becomes kind of a race to the bottom. Everybody's trying to survive in a really, really competitive market where you're trying to find guests and people to come through the door who also haven't got that disposable income. So sadly, it is a huge industry that's under massive, massive pressure, and we are at the point of saturation where we don't think that those costs can go on to the guests anymore.
You're paying more in national insurance contributions as an employer. You're paying more in the minimum wage as well. That's gone up. You may agree with that as an individual and previously a Labour supporter, but that's going to make things difficult for you as a business owner as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I mean, fundamentally, I'm a Labour supporter and have been my whole life. I come from a working-class, single-parent background, and I believe that the fundamentals of what the Labour Party should be standing for is, the opportunity for everybody, no matter background where they come from, for education system, for a care system, for the ability to earn good money to be able to afford to buy a house. However, there does need to be a little bit a look at from front bench ministers into how businesses operate, because businesses need to operate to support a workforce. Every great business, every great entrepreneur, every great business that is successful is built on a workforce of people that enjoy the workspace that they are, the environment that they go to, the money that they can earn, their life that they can move forward. Workers, those businesses need to be able to support that business, support the staff that are there working with them to create that environment moving forward. So whilst, of course, I show the fundamentals of the Labour Party, what it stands for, I'm with. However, the understanding of business is something that they really do need to start listening a little bit more to industry, particularly hospitality, for this sector's point of view.
Tom, they'll be here very shortly and may well have heard what you had to say. Thanks for joining us here on the Politics Hub this evening. Really appreciate it. Let's bring in our duo for this evening then. Former Labour political advisor Max Wilson and former Conservative special advisor Salma Shah. Max, it's interesting, as we were hearing the Chancellor speak then about this relief and this freeze, it felt like something that she could have been saying months ago. Why didn't she?
Well, it's a really difficult situation. And I completely sympathise with Tom and what he's saying. There are tens of thousands of pubs across the country that are hugely, hugely struggling, and for them to be asked to suddenly have this huge leap,
Yeah.
Going from business rate from last year to this year is going to have an enormous effect on the bottom line. So I completely sympathise from them that how they're going to sustain their businesses with that leap. But from the government's perspective, it's also tough for them as well, because let's keep in mind that this leap is from a temporary cut during COVID. And so it's slightly unfair from a government perspective to compare 2025 to 26. Really, the fairer comparison is, say, 2020. And ultimately, I am sure that in a dream scenario, you don't want to be overly taxing small businesses, which are the lifeblood of the economy, which fuel the economic growth that we need, that help that employment. But that is that's an optimal situation. Governments have to deal with the reality of the situation, and the reality is making the books balance and making sure that they're able to fund public services. And so this money has to come from somewhere. And whilst we definitely shouldn't be overtaxing businesses, business rates, unfortunately, is a revenue raiser for government.
Salma, then, taking what Max says then, if they have to balance the books and deal with life as it is, are they just going to let some pubs go to the wall then?
I expect that is the case, but balancing the books is quite an interesting argument, because there were ways to balance the books with cuts in welfare spending. There were ways to balance the books, that didn't involve hitting business so hard. I think it's really difficult to have a message saying that you're going to balance the books and you want to go for growth, where the engine of growth, which is business, is having to operate with one hand tied behind its back. So it gets the hit on NICs, it gets the hit on business rates, and these are retail businesses. It gets the hit on energy costs as well, which we know are rising. It gets the hit on inflation. It'll get the hit on the employer's rights bill as well, because those businesses that you've just seen there, pubs and restaurants, are very dependent on a particular type of worker that is, in some instances, casual or part-time. And so regulation upon inflation, upon cost, upon taxation is not really part of the government's agenda. And Max, I totally understand the concept of having to balance the books, but everything is about judgment and choice. And I think there is that question then, whether actually the Chancellor is really owner of her own agenda when she gets moved from pillar to post quite significantly on those big questions of what is happening in the budget.
We will have much more on it. It's a lot, isn't it? It makes you want to reach for a drink as it happens. A bit earlier on, I spoke to Ben Guerin, who set up a website that has a slightly unrepeatable name, actually, where you can find out how affected your local pub is. Let's hear what he had to say. Great to see you. Tell me why you had the idea for the website.
Well, like many Kiwis in London, I love a great British pub, and my friends and I were talking about where we should go for our Thursday pint a couple of weeks ago, and we're both business owners, so we've been thinking a lot about the changes to business rates, and we know just how hard it's been for pubs in particular. So we thought, well, we should go somewhere that's been really badly affected, and then we're both a couple of nerds doing website businesses, so we thought, well, maybe we should build a site that lets other people do the same.
Were you surprised at what you found?
I really was. Surprised not just by how many pubs had had such a massive increase in their rateable value, but also by how strange the formula seemed to be. You might have two pubs on the same street, one that's gone up barely at all, by 20% maybe, and the one next door has gone up 300-400%. So it's something that a lot of, since I put the website up, a lot of pub owners have messaged me on LinkedIn or Twitter and sort of said, this has been really affecting their business because it just seems so unfair.
And have those pub owners been going on that website to see what the competitors are up against as well?
I'm sure they have. I haven't seen that myself, but there's certainly been a lot of feedback from publicans who, have had a pretty tough run at it lately, who've been, glad to see someone drawing attention to it.
Final question to you, Ben. If you were in charge, if you were the Chancellor, what would you do to help these places out?
Well, I think the measures announced today are a great start, but there are two big gaps. Number one, this is only pubs, and these same measures are affecting all other kinds of...
And music venues as well, by the way.
Yeah, pubs and music venues, that's right. But it doesn't help cafes, it doesn't help restaurants. And, for cafes, you've got to sell an awful lot of coffees to account for the increase in business rates. So it would be great to see these measures extended wider. Secondly, VAT is still one of the largest costs that these businesses have to deal with, and a number of pub owners, have said it would be fantastic if the UK had a European-style VAT system for venues like this, and that could be one of the things that saves 100+ pubs a year. And then I think thirdly, what's really interesting to see is the headline relief announced today was the freeze on the rates and 15% decrease. What's actually more interesting is underneath that they've said that they're going to investigate looking at changing from a turnover-based valuation to a square footage-based valuation, but making pubs more consistent with other types of hospitality venues. I think that would be a great start for nothing else, and it would just help publicans manage the costs of these 3 yearly increases a bit better.
Ben, great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me on.
The views there of a British pub-loving Kiwi. A bit earlier on as well, I also got the view of the Shadow Chancellor, Sir Mel Stride, about all of this. Shadow Chancellor, when the Tories were in government from 2010 to 2024, there was a net loss of more than 10,000 pubs. That's a drop of around 20%. Why wasn't more done then to look after them?
Well, I think we did do a lot. And if you remember, through COVID, through the furlough scheme, we did a massive amount to support businesses, including pubs, up and down the country. What we're seeing with this government is pubs closing primarily because of the kind of tax and regulatory approach that they're taking. So we've seen business rates spiking up. We've seen national insurance on people that work in pubs, particularly affects lower paid people, younger people getting that first job. And we've got the employment rights legislation coming down the line that's going to make it more expensive, more onerous to recruit and employ people. And if you add all those things up, that's why those kind of businesses are really suffering.
Yeah, the government would say those young people getting those first jobs are now being better paid by the hour because the minimum wage has gone up. You talk about spikes in rates. There was a spike in rates in 2017 with the revaluation then. Things went up nearly 15%. You talk about the relief during COVID, which was, of course, relatively generous, but also very temporary. You could have done more sooner.
Well, we came in, particularly for retail, hospitality and leisure, with very significant reliefs for those particular businesses, which carried on right until the end of our time in office. Now, this government has chosen to phase that out. They've also had their re-evaluation, and this has also led to a huge increase in some of the rates that are being paid by those businesses. I was just doing another interview and there was somebody on there talking about it's all very well to get £300 or £400 back due to the changes announced today, but my costs have gone up, he's saying, by £20,000. Now, that's not all rates. 6 of that was rates, I think. The rest of it is national insurance, which, as I say, particularly hits those younger people getting that first job. OK, well, you would abolish rates entirely. I think that's one of your high street rates. We would provide a relief up to £110,000 for any retail, hospitality or leisure business, so mainly high street, pubs, restaurants,
and that would be
shops.
100% relief?
That's it. That would be, yes. So the first £110,000 that you fall due to pay by way of rates, you would have complete relief from that. So for about 250,000 businesses, they would be taken out of rates altogether. But the only way you can do that is by controlling spending, particularly the welfare bill, getting people off benefits into
So that's how you get the £4 billion you'd need to do that. So that's how you get that money.
Absolutely right. Now, if you duck the hard decisions around controlling welfare spending and benefit spending, as this government has, you can't afford to do that. And that's why they're constantly going back to business, loading on those costs to the extent that many of them are simply becoming unviable. It's why we've got the highest unemployment in 5 years. You mentioned people on the minimum wage. Fine, if you've got a job, that's fine, but too many young people are not getting jobs. We've got around 900,000 young people who are not in employment training or education at the moment, and those numbers have been going up. So these are the kind of things that happen when you make employment more expensive, which is what this government's done.
When was the last time you were in your local?
Oh, certainly within the last week.
You had a pint?
Yeah, I did, absolutely.
Expensive these days to have a pint.
Yeah, very expensive.
Look, against that backdrop, younger people are also drinking less alcohol these days. Pubs are not attracting people to have a drink and therefore revenue for those pubs on the alcohol. What would you do there? I mean, VAT is chargeable on 0% beers, for example. Yeah. What about cutting that to give them a break?
We need to look, as a party as we are, at all aspects of business, because what we want to do is to get those business costs down but we want to do it in a way that is responsible and affordable. In other words, we've got to deal with a growing debt that we've got at the moment. It's got a big debt problem, at the same time as making savings that we can put in to tax cuts. So they're all things that we're considering in terms of putting our plan forward to boost business. Yeah.
Quick word on the Gorton and Denton by-election, which is happening in around about a month's time. Reform have announced that Matthew Goodwin, the academic, is going to be their candidate when that by-election happens. We don't know who the Conservatives candidate is yet, but you came 5th last time round. Will you definitely field a candidate there when...
Without question, we will field a candidate. I think it's fair to say, Matt, that, you know, that is a ultra-safe Labour seat, historically at least. There hasn't been a Conservative victory there in 50 years.
No, but historically...
So I think the expectations are relatively low, but we will fight for every single vote.
Yeah, because historically, in the constituencies that ended up forming Gorton and Denton, you've been second for a long, long time, but relegated to 5th last time. Is it almost worth the bother this time round?
Well, we will always give people an option to vote for a Conservative candidate in general elections and in by-elections. That's the right thing to do. We will fight for every single vote. I think the big story with that particular by-election, of course, is Andy Burnham and all the psychodrama about whether the National Executive Committee would let him stand or not, which is a reflection on the parlous position of this Prime Minister amongst his own parliamentary party.
If you were watching the Politics Hub last night, we banned the word psychodrama. We'll let you have that one. We'll let you have that one.
Get that one for free. Okay.
Mel Stride, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Listening to that was Dan Tomlinson, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, who said to me as you sat down, you've wanted to come on this programme for ages. Look, every time you do a U-turn, you're more than welcome to explain why. So why another one?
So, look, we today have announced 15% off pubs bills this year coming from the 1st of April. That will apply across the board to all pubs compared to the bill they would have had otherwise. And then
which is still going up.
And then a freeze in year 2 and year 3, which will mean that 3/4 of pubs this year are going to see their bills either flat or falling, and then they'll be frozen in year 2 and year 3. It's a really quite significant intervention. It's been welcomed by the groups that represent both the independent pub chain, the independent pubs and the larger pub chains as well. We've been listening to them since the budget. There were concerns that have been raised about the way they're valued in business rates.
Why didn't you talk to them before the budget? Why does it always take you to talk to people after the fact and then do an about turn?
Well, we did talk to them before the budget. We did
nothing.
We did lots of engagement with lots of different sectors before the budget. Before the budget, the way that pubs are valued on business rates had the sort of broad support of the sector. After the budget, they raised significant concerns with it once they'd seen their new values. We couldn't tell them before. That wouldn't have been appropriate to start telling everyone what their values would be until everyone was told at the same time. We've looked at their concerns. I've been looking at them since December last year, as you may be aware, and we've come forward with this package quite quickly in response to those concerns that have been raised. And stepping back, look, we've seen 7,000 pubs close under the Tories between 2010 and 2014. Lots of us really enjoy going to the pub, the social scene.
You're a pub goer yourself?
I've got a very good local.
Like a pint?
Got a very, yes, precisely. Got a very good local up in Barnet who I've been talking to about this as well, both before and after the budget. And we have made a significant intervention today. It's also going to apply to music venues too, and we think that's the right thing to do as well.
You talk about pubs closing. It may well be that people running pubs in between the rating value bit coming out and your about turn today have thought, you know what, stuff this, I can't make the numbers add up, I can't get into it. They may have closed down in the meantime.
Well, one of the things that we've put out today on the government website, if you're a pub or music venue, you'll be able to go online, you'll be able to type in what your rateable value is, the amount the property's worth, and we will estimate for them then what the bill will be that they'll get in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
And we have made sure we've got this change in place so that it can be delivered from April from new bills, and that none of these businesses will have seen a bill that's then going to change. The first bill that they get is going to be the bill that reflects this change. And it's worth... There's this big difference, and it's a bit complicated, and you have to forgive me, but there's the value of the property that's gone up for lots since the pandemic. People would expect that. After the last revaluation happened in the middle of the pandemic, the latest one happened in 2024.
Sure.
And what the business rates that people are actually going to pay. And we have changed the tax system. The larger business... The larger businesses now paying 33% higher tax rate than the high street businesses because of our reforms. And And as well as that, we're spending £4.3 billion in the next few years. Right? There's lots of things that the government could be spending money on. We've chosen to spend that.
Or you could be cutting money that you're spending on some things. We had Mel Stride, and I'm sure Salma will say similar when we speak to her in a second. You're going to have to look again at finding the money from somewhere else, aren't you? Like the welfare bill.
Well, look, Mel Stride and all of the Tories that stood up today in the chamber when I was announcing this decision, I just can't believe they can speak with a straight face about some of their policy proposals they're putting forward.
Let's deal with the here and now, Dan. Come on.
Because they are saying that, of course, they would have cut business rates. Every single time they had a chance, they didn't. They didn't reform the business rate system in 14 years. They left it as it was, and it wasn't working for high streets, and we've started that rebalancing and that reform within the system. And now they're saying they can just find whatever it is, 10, 20, 30 billion. Well, he's saying 4 billion, but the business rate system as a whole costs a lot more than that, and yet he keeps saying that he's going to get rid of business rates entirely.
Well, he did explain to me earlier, he's not abolishing them entirely. That's
good to know.
It's a more generous relief for pubs and music venues. What about the rest of the hospitality sector, though? What about cafes and restaurants who are all struggling, hotels? What about them?
So on hotels specifically, we want to look at the way they're valued too. It is quite similar to the way pubs are valued, mainly on their takings rather than on the bricks and mortar like the rest of the high street. So we're going to be talking with them about that. Today we've announced this high streets strategy that we're going to be working on across government. We want to engage with businesses, small and large, from across the country on what more we can do with them. But look, I'm not sitting here pretending that things are easy for businesses up and down the country right now.
Because you've never run a business, have you?
Under the Conservatives... Well, no, I haven't run a business.
Neither have I, to be fair.
No, I haven't run it. Maybe one day. But at the moment, what I'm trying to do is make sure I can do the best job I can as both a government minister and a constituency MP. I was elected in 2024 to serve my constituents, to try and make sure that we can get as good an outcome as them as possible. And we know, right? We know that business costs went up significantly in 2022. We all felt it in our pockets in terms of higher inflation, 11% in 2022. And we know that there's more that we need to do to support our high streets to thrive, because they're the heart of so many communities. Pubs are really pivotal to that. But I do want to, express... I understand that this government does need to continue to engage with hospitality businesses and high streets more broadly, and we want to do that through our new high street strategy that I've announced today.
Dan Tomlinson, thank you very much indeed for your time. You're welcome to come on.
Have me back.
We'll see. The government's support for pubs will feature heavily on our new late-night programme. It is The Wrap. It's with Anna tonight from 10, here to discuss all of the day's big stories and the best of tomorrow's papers. Will be the journalist and broadcaster Sonia Soda and the Times columnist Matthew Parris. Right now, you're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up in a moment, more on that business rates U-turn for pubs and venues with our duo, Max and Salma.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We've been talking about the increase in government support for pubs. Let's bring in our duo for this evening, former Labour political advisor Max Wilson and former Conservative special advisor Salma Shah. We had Dan Tomlinson here, Salma, just before the break. He was the one who had to get up in the Commons today and say what they were doing. And he got a bit of a slap on the wrist, actually, for going over his time allotment, didn't he, from the Speaker?
He did. I mean, actually, it's been done several times, but if you go over 10 minutes when you give a statement, you do get into trouble. The rule is that you do 10 minutes because it's the opportunity for parliamentarians to scrutinise you.
Yeah.
And the job of the Speaker is to protect parliamentarians' time because, you know, if a minister comes in and then essentially filibusters from the dispatch box, then it's not very good for scrutiny.
The rules are the same here. If you go over time-wise, you do get a telling off, especially from SJ, who's coming on after me. Max, more seriously, though, what did you make of Dan Tomlinson's explanation for what everyone else is seeing as a U-turn from the government?
Yeah, I thought he explained things really, really well. He explained the government's thinking. He explained why they needed to make this change. But he also rightly highlighted the ridiculousness that came out of Mel Stride. The notion that suddenly, after 18 months of opposition, they're suddenly going to magic up this a possibility of just abolishing all business rates is
a lot. He did explain.
As Dan said,
he
14 years to do this.
Let's correct this.
Relief on the first 115 grand, I think it was.
Focusing very much on the relief that would be provided to high street shop fronts and high street businesses, and it would be a relief up to a certain amount, so 110,000, which they have costed. Now, this is not the same thing.
How is it costed, though? Where's this money coming from? Is it from efficiency savings?
But it's costed in the sense that they know how much it is and they will have to make the choices, and they're going to be different choices to Labour. And the question here is, you said Dan Tomlinson explained. He explained the government policy. He explained where we are today, but he's not really explaining to those people who are watching this evening and to those MPs who are watching this evening who need to go back to their constituencies and explain it, how you're actually going to make this sustainable for the businesses that are actually struggling right now. So 15% off, where you've currently uprated the rateable value, is not going to make a significant difference. And again, they're still looking at what's happening with hotels. They're still looking at what's happening with the wider hospitality sector. The original problem is that they didn't look at the significant change in the rateable value and how that was going to impact this growth that you keep talking about.
But let me turn this into a question for you, Max. I mean, sure, the Conservatives in opposition can say an awful lot of things because we're 3 years away from a general election that they may not win. But should Labour, knowing they probably were going to come into government, had a policy position on this in advance and not, here we are, more than a year and a half later, doing what looks like another U-turn?
Yeah, you're talking about U-turns, and they're not great. They're obviously not. No one wants to be doing that. It's better, if you're going to make them, it's better to do them and get on with it, which is what the government...
Maybe when the boss is out of the country as well. I mean, that...
Maybe. It's a case of better late than never, right? They've got into the place where they are. But I think it is credible what they're doing. That 15%, Sam is saying that it should be more. Sure, I would like it to be more as well. Mel Stride definitely wants it to be more. But I think that what's also important is that it's credible what the government is suggesting. What Mel Stride and the Tories are suggesting is not credible. It is ridiculous. And also, if the Tories are supposedly trying to re-find their economic credibility, I'm not sure just trying to magic up these numbers is really going to...
Sorry, Matt. That's the question here is about the real immediate danger of these businesses going under because the rateable value and the impact of that, taken together with everything else that is happening, has not been properly assessed by the government.
Let me just come in on this, because the economic credibility thing is an important one, because we know at the heart of the government's economic plan is growth. And we also know, looking at the last 3 quarters figures, it is on the slide and the predictions aren't good. So therefore, you have people in business saying, why are you loading us with costs and not freeing us up to make more money and achieve that growth that you want, Max?
It is definitely tough. And it goes back to my earlier point. Everybody in government wants economic growth. Everybody in government wants to be helping small businesses like pubs to thrive. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's easy to do. That is the objective. But it has to be done in a sustainable, in a responsible way. And I think what Labour is trying to do is fiscally and economically responsible. And I think what the Tories are suggesting is very much not. And I think that's going to get found out.
Thank you for the moment. You are watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. Coming up, our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates heads to Greater Manchester to gauge the mood there ahead of the Gorton and Denton by-election as Labour's row over blocking this man, the King in the North, Andy Burnham, from standing for the seat, rumbles on. Now, the race for the Gorton and Denton by-election has begun in earnest, with voters set to head to the polls at the end of February. Labour won the seat in 2024 with over half the vote, but the party's campaign is off to a fractious start after the Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham was blocked from standing over the weekend. Both the Greens and Reform UK are eyeing a win there. The latter announced their choice of candidate earlier today. Our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates has been in the constituency to gauge the mood.
An East Manchester suburb, Labour forever, in 1 month's time could decide Keir Starmer's fate. A by-election shock could trigger a revolt against the Prime Minister. Can anyone predict what will happen?
Who would you vote for?
Reform.
A constituency of distinct communities, once united by Labour. But politics has changed and division is rife. Could pitting one against the other work better this time?
you've got very different, highly charged local issues in the two halves of the seat. In the Manchester part, the more Muslim and young professional part, there'll be a lot of campaigning on Gaza, particularly with the Workers' Party picking up a high-profile candidate. In the Gorton part, you may see a lot of quite polarising identity politics from Reform UK, potentially on issues like crime, grooming gangs, immigration and so forth.
On the streets, there's uncertainty, no central direction, but some miss the man Keir Starmer blocked at the weekend from standing. Could he have united the tribes?
I'm petrified that Reform are going to get in, and I was hoping it would be Andy Burnham, to be perfectly honest with you, because he has changed.
That would have made the difference.
I think so. I think he really does care about Manchester, and I think he would have cared. And I don't know why they blocked him, and I don't know who they're going to get. Greens, are they going to split the vote?
So you would change your vote from Labour to Green at this election?
Yes, I would.
And why would you do that?
Because they're the only party I see representing my values, really.
If Andy Burnham had stood, would you have voted for him?
Oh, 100%. Because he's, what he's done for Manchester alone is pretty impressive, you know.
Those with their ear closest to the community say Labour set back their chances.
I think if Andy Burnham had been the Labour candidate, they would have been strong favourites to win here. I don't think it would have been guaranteed, because I think that the Greens and Reform would still have felt that with the national polling as it is, they would be in with a chance. There's no doubt, though, when you speak to local campaigners, they would have felt much more confident about winning this seat with Andy Burnham. He's a very popular mayor and he goes down well in places like this.
Voters know a big personality when they see it, and like this constituency's prodigal son, they still bring in the punters. So by blocking Andy Burnham, who could have topped the bill round here, Keir Starmer is owning the result of this by-election. But is his star power alone enough to knit together the many diverse communities that have delivered this seat to Labour in the past? A multi-way battle with no obvious front-runner for a Manchester seat surrounded by Labour's grandees. Does the party have enough fight to ensure victory? Sam Coates, Sky News, Gorton and Denton.
Well, Sam, with that last question of yours ringing in my mind, what is your spidey sense telling you about what's going to happen there?
Oh, God, I wish I knew, Matt. It's day one proper of this by-election campaign, and I couldn't tell you who was going to win. I think it is going to be a blockbuster of a campaign. Look, I've been to a Reform event. I'm currently at a Green Party rally. Zach Polansky's speaking on stage behind me. Look, I can tell you about the challenges. This is Zach Polansky's first electoral challenge, and there are all sorts of questions, not least whether or not they can spell Gorton right on their election campaign leaflets. But more importantly, this is a party that's looking to become the successor of Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. You had Stop the War figures on the stage before talking about Gaza. Is that the right approach to galvanise the people in this constituency, make them excited about politics? They think their main opponents are Reform. The challenge for Reform, well, they look from that rally today like they're going to run a national style of campaign, national issues. There's a little mention of grooming gangs. Do they lean into that as the campaign goes on? We will wait and see. Do they have the momentum that they claim? But Labour, the stakes are highest for Labour because of what's at stake for the Prime Minister himself. My test for them. Now, this is a seat surrounded by, as I mentioned in that film, big beasts. You've got Angela Rayner on one side, you've got Lisa Nandy, you've got the Chief Whip, Johnny Reynolds, just down the road. Is Labour going to put everything into this by-election with everything that has happened? Or do they pull back slightly? We can measure the commitment of the party to winning this seat because the stakes for Keir Starmer are so high. If he doesn't, there could be a challenge. But for the people of Gorton and Denton, it could be a polarising experience with the Greens and Reform particularly battling this out. Could this actually turn into a toxic campaign? That is what we're looking for over the next 4 or so weeks.
Sam, it sounds like you're filmed before a live studio audience there with the applause going on behind you, and I have to say it was fantastic analysis. Deserved every clap you got there. Let's bring in our duo for this evening. Max Wilson and Salma Shah are still with me. I think we're all chuckling at that typo of Gorton, isn't it? And I bet people in Gorton themselves aren't chuckling at that, spelt with an E and not an O. But in all seriousness, there's a lot riding on this for a lot of the parties.
Absolutely. And I think here's the sort of trade-offs that you have to think about when you think about Andy Burnham's candidacy. On the face of it, it makes total sense that you wouldn't want to sacrifice a successful mayoral candidate for a parliamentary seat.
Halfway through his term.
Halfway through the term to fight a seat. And there are obviously cynical reasons, perhaps, that are sitting behind that, which is it going to destabilise the leadership? Does it then create splits in the Labour Party, etc., etc.? However, there is that question about that media circus, those hopes that are pinned on this by-election, because you have these two challenger parties in the Greens and Reform coming in and turning it into almost a national litmus test. Now, anybody who's been involved in polling will tell you by-elections don't give you everything, but it does give you that sense of trend and momentum. And if you lose that, then it can become problematic, nervousness in parliamentary parties, etc. So I think you have to weigh up the importance of the mayoralty versus this seat. And, you know, as we heard from your Vox Pops, not scientific, but does give you a sense that, you know, you are going to need a big candidate to go and field that. But, you know, glad it's not me having to make those calls.
Because, Max, it's been Labour forever. Look, Gorton and Dent is a relatively new constituency that happens an amalgamation of others a couple of elections ago. But, as I said to Salma, a lot is riding on this for all the parties. But for Labour, it's vital, isn't it?
It is. Of course, it's always important. You always want to sustain the winning seat, of course. And I think that now, because of all the shenanigans with the Burnham potentially going forward, I think now, if Labour lose, then obviously that's going to look bad on the government and Keir Starmer, and that's going to add to the pressure there. But I think that, that's what I've been answering over the weekend as well, that I think Keir Starmer faced only bad choices here. There were no good options available. This way, you're risking one by-election instead of potentially risking two by-elections. So I think that is the challenge.
Do you buy into the cost argument as well from Labour?
Look, yeah,
that's a no.
No,
that's definitely
not a no. There are cost implications, and of course, nobody wants to waste money then. Also, because there are so many other elections going on in May, it means reallocating resources there where it could be spent in Scotland or Wales. So that is a factor. But it is also, ultimately, there's obviously politics going on here. But in terms of the actual by-election itself, I think that it's interesting seeing Sam speaking to people talking about considering Green, considering Reform. I think what you're going to see in this by-election is a little bit of a microcosm of what I think is going to happen in hundreds of seats in the next general election, where you're going to have this 3, 4, 5-way split between different parties. And instead of 10, 15, 20 years ago, where a party at a by-election or a general election would get 10,000, 20,000 majorities, at the next general election, and I think in this by-election, whoever wins is going to be 1, 2, 3,000, and I think 3 or 4 parties are going to be clustered really closely, which is going to make predictions of how seats are going to go really, really tough, but also really interesting for us.
Yes, definitely. Well, interesting for us to talk about because, look, are we seeing more now of the likely fragmenting of our politics across more of these parties? You know that Reform have got to skip in their step, the Greens have got to skip in their step, the Lib Dems had big success last time. Is that where this is all going?
I mean, I think it could very easily, but we've seen since 2010, you know, that the first past the post system can throw up so many different variables of what governments are going to look like. We've also seen in politics parties within parties within parties. And it's not just sort of the Brexiteers versus the Remainers and the Conservative Party.
Or Prosper UK now. They were sat there last night.
Coming in. But also, you know, the soft left versus sort of the Blairites in the Labour Party. So we've seen these dynamics play out. What is going to be interesting, and I agree that, you know, you're going to get tighter margins on victories, what that actually does to our system, because you don't have the sort of certainty for a lot of parliamentarians that are going to sit there for long periods, and the reaction and the scrutiny. Are you going to be able to have the same level of control of centralised political parties in the way that you used to? I think the far more interesting thing is, what is the impact of that on Parliament, on ministerial roles, on what that does
on long-term planning?
On long-term planning, exactly. So I think that even though we have this split, let's see how that goes. But also, let's not underprice the fact that the electorate is quite smart and could also vote quite tactically in order to give certainty around if you play the message correctly.
Smart answers, both. Thank you very much indeed. Still to come here on the Politics Hub, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron engage in some shady banter over the French president's Top Gun-esque Davos appearance. He did have a problem with his eye, let's be honest. It wasn't just a style choice. But we'll be discussing that in a moment.
Coming up on the UK Tonight from 8, a danger to life in Devon as Storm Chandra brings heavy rain and strong winds to the UK and Ireland. Also tonight, I'll be speaking to the landlord who barred Labour MPs from his pub to find out what he thinks of the government's package of business rate supports and whether he'll let them back in. And tonight, we'll have pictures from around the country as landmarks are lit up to mark Holocaust Memorial Day. All that and much more on the UK Tonight from 8.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
There's a fresh look to your news from 10 on Sky News.
It's a new show called The Wrap, every night of the week.
We'll still bring you the day's biggest stories,
but with more lively debate,
more in-depth commentary,
and more of what you need to know.
Plus a look at what's making tomorrow's headlines.
The Wrap.
Everything wrapped up for you from 10 on Sky News.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
We're so used to seeing you with Rob. What's it like doing this kind of stuff when he's not here?
Yeah, I miss him. He just inspired me to be a better person. He's shown us what living looks like in the toughest and most difficult of circumstances.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
He had a beautiful death. This is about a dying person's choice to die peacefully when they want to, on their terms.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts watching us live.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Now, amid all the geopolitics and speeches at Davos last week, there was another thing that caused quite a stir. Yes, indeed, Emmanuel Macron's eyewear, those fetching blue shades. The French president channeled his inner Tom Cruise with the reflective aviators, apparently all too stylishly disguise a medical condition with his eye.
Having a place like Europe, which sometimes is too slow, for sure, and needs to be reformed, for sure.
The specs drew comments from Donald Trump for sure, and in the weeks since have gone viral over social media, as I'm sure you've seen, with meme makers making hay out of Mr. Macron's look. And now even Keir Starmer can't help getting in on the game, donning a pair of aviator shades at a comedy show to pay homage, you could say, to the French president. Macron replied to that video, commenting for sure, a saying of his that also took over the socials, with Sir Keir coming back again with this AI-generated image of himself and the French president in full Top Gun get-up. Not sure who's Maverick, not sure who's Goose. Hang on, is it Maverick is Keir Starmer there? Of course, and Goose is his wingman. No Iceman to be seen. Let's bring in our duo for this evening, Max and Salma. What do you think about a bit of quality bants between leaders, Max? If you can call it quality.
Yeah, Bant's certainly the quality very much to be decided. It's good fun. It does demonstrate a good relationship between them. Who put that out? Did you say that went on the Labour socials?
I think it was, yes. Yeah, Keir Starmer's own.
Well, I think that shows a good sense of humour, down to earth, good fun. I'm all for it.
Salma?
I find all of this so cynical, I have to say. Like, why did Macron choose to wear those reflective aviators, you know, that had the blue shade that seemed to... Just have an eye patch or, you know, turn up or decide that you're not going to do it because of your medical condition. Like, if you look back at Macron's presidency and the way that he uses image, it's absolutely designed to steal the show. You know, Davos was going to be about AI and
you've
President
answered your own
Trump.
question then, haven't you?
And therefore, it's cynical, right? So he's done this very intentionally. In the same way, I think that was Matt Ford's Political Party, his comedy podcast. He has found a way to have a moment with Keir Starmer, who's not sort of necessarily known for being that personable or comedic, I would say, doesn't have that warm presence. And, you know, the comms people at Labour HQ have jumped on it all of a sudden. Now, I'm not saying that shouldn't be allowed, but I often think that, you know, the memification of politicians should really belong to the comics. And once you start letting politicians sort of start owning that themselves, it becomes this, I think, slightly cynical.
I think if I'm Macron and I'm faced between the choice of wearing an eye patch or a pair of aviators, I know which one I'm going to choose.
I think if I'm Macron, I'm thinking, everyone's talking about AI and President Trump. How do I make it about me?
It wasn't just the aviators, it was the fact they were blue reflective.
Yeah.
And that really was going the whole hog, wasn't it? Nevertheless, Salma, come back to your point. I mean, having a bit of a sense of humour, doesn't that humanise it? Sure, it may be a meme, it may be using social media, but don't we want a bit more humanity from our politicians? And that shows they can have a laugh.
You know, when times were easier, yeah, we could have a bit of a laugh. Obama doing his bit and, you know, those set pieces that you do, Washington Correspondents' Dinner, the lobby lunches that happen in our parliament. But I think sometimes, I mean, it might be me being po-faced, but sometimes things are so serious that you sort of want people to respond to the seriousness of the time. And it feels a little bit in-jokey as well. You know, the whole sort of Top Gun AI-generated thing.
Max, just to finish off, Macron does love the sort of bromance of all this stuff. I mean, we've seen the sort of the absolute testosterone-fueled handshakes with Donald Trump and they never seem to let go and that kind of thing. Is that ever a good look? Because you saw, you know, outside of the politics, the sort of friendship between Blair and Bush. We saw Cameron and Clegg seemingly getting on famously in the Rose Garden when they announced the coalition all those years ago. Is that a good thing? I mean, maybe it just comes naturally to these people sometimes. They want to let loose.
I think it's good comms. I think it's a good image that Macron is projecting. He's demonstrating that he's comfortable, he's kind of cool, he's comfortable in his own skin, he's powerful. I think he's giving off all these good images. Another image that comes to mind about Macron was when France hosted the World Cup.
We're almost out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you very much indeed. That's it. We'll be back tomorrow at 7.